guess for me, passivity in people is when an event or some social issue is brought up into like the majority of people, but because it doesn't affect them personally, they take no part in it. And they might criticize or like comment in like a very vague way, but it never enters the core part of their life.
I want to talk about passiveness in context. So in relation to being active and within a context of circumstances sort of constraining your decision choices and therefore pushing you either to be passive or allowing you to be active. So I also want to argue against the idea that passivity is some kind of ingrown trait that you're born with or that is sort of culturally learned. I don't think that that's actually quite accurate.
For me personally, the term passive takes on a lot of different forms. I know a lot of times it can be referred to in a very negative sense. So the idea that you're not being active, you're not actively chasing after something else. But I think for passiveness in regards to myself as an Asian American, as specifically an Asian, it's a very big part of my identity. And as such, I can't put a label on it, whether it be positive or negative.
So in other words, an image of passivity is often very little to do with the people to whom it's attributed, but rather to those people who think that such and such people are passive. Actually, it's interesting. I think that Asian Americans have been quite involved in the recent episodes. For example, the egging incidents, the targets of that were two South Asian American women, and they and their friends were not shy about speaking out, right? And calling this incident out into public attention. Asian American students have been involved in a effort that's been at least a year or two of students trying to convince the administration to institute a diversity course requirement, right? So while they may not have been the ones, out front in the rallies, talking, they have been very seriously involved. So I don't think that this incident really is actually a display of Asian American passivity. It's really more an incident of Asian American involvement and engagement.
There's something different going on this time on campus, at least from what I know from the past 6 years, and that is that there are student organizations, not existing organizations, that students are organizing within their groups and across groups that they identify with to really host conversations and to really make demands in the administration, and also to just really talk to one another and find out what's going on.
People have also wondered, well, if we just sit around and talk, isn't that just another act of passivity? And I would say that I think that talking is not the end goal of any progressive movement. You talk, and then you have to do something else, But I think at the same time that talking is not just a frivolous act, but it is very much an incredibly important part of, learning to have a voice and to take up space. So to that extent, I think that talking isn't the end, but talking is also part of the means of getting to what it is that we want to do.
The biggest thing that we should do is try to get the cultural groups to integrate other ethnicities and cultures, and to sort of promote that it's not necessarily, it's a safe space for people within that culture, but it's also a way for other people to learn about that culture. So I think if those cultural groups and even, I don't know, fraternities and sororities and ASG and stuff like that, if all those groups can get that idea going, then we'll be able to break down those divisions.
I think that there has to be more dialogue about it, and there has to be a goal as well. I mean, when you want people to not be passive, I think you have to tell them what to be active in favor of. And a lot of times, if people have grown up in areas in which issues are not as clearly defined, or they don't really have a sense of purpose about what social inequality is, or what racial or ethnic justices, and if those aren't struggles that really move them, I think a lot of students have no idea how to connect to a broader purpose. And so I think that there has to be some kind of agenda and some way of bringing people in at whatever levels they're comfortable participating, and that's going to take some work. It's going to take some kind of structure and building and figuring out how to include people more on their terms until they become more comfortable being more proactive.
Obviously, when we want to bring up the social issues that we're addressing with the Asian NE project, there are going to be people who are definitely uninterested and will never hear about it. And to combat this, I guess, the Asian NE project, we distinctly target stereotypical characteristics of groups of communities. So for example, we set up workshops, and then people who are interested in workshops will come to the workshops. We set up discussion forums with faculty members, including President Shapiro, and then that will attract another type of people to come to the events. I think because everyone has their own sort of interests. It's the way we combat passivity is to find every single way that every single interest that people have, and then tie it to the social issue.
One thing is to help to give them a vocabulary to think and understand race and racial experience. And that's what we try to do in our classes in Asian American Studies. People will say, I sort of had a feeling, but now it gives them words. So when you have words, you're able to share, you're able to articulate, you're able to mobilize and organize. But I think that secondly is we need to give students confidence to be able to do this. And so, we give students projects, we give them resources to say, here's a project, we want you to do this and run with it. That's kind of what we did with our advisory board, which then Asian NU Project did. We said, we charged them with the task and the resources to do. And so then they did something with it. And then third is something which I hope that we can develop more in Asian American Studies is I think that there's a lot of different mediums for people to articulate and to have a voice, to share a voice and to have a voice. And one is a literal voice, is by talking, right? But we're much more complex beings, and we express ourselves through art, through music, through drama, through theater.